Okay, we're getting right into this. Wait, I make sure I'm muting. Okay. Hero might get up while we're playing. I'm gonna try something where I saw someone solo. DJ Honglu. DJ Honglu.
참으로 친절도 하시고 남은 자들을 한 방에 불러 모아 서로 찾아낼 수고로움을 들일 필요 없이 1등을 겨루라는 것처럼
한치 앞길도 알지 못할 터인데 함부로 입을 놀리지 말거라 가와. 네가 그 이름을 더 씌운 것이 고작 이런 사리 분별 못하는 교.
저기 글귀가 쓰여 있어요.
현재 1위부터 새로운 만큼 벽에 걸린 질문. 이 가주 심사의 근원을 아우르고 있는
우습군.
상대가 납득한다면 그저 대화로서 이 잘라질 것은 아무것도 없죠. 지금까지 그래왔던 것처럼 뺏고 뺏기는 동전 쟁탈전을 이어가시면 될 뿐.
어떻게 하실 건가요?
만약 지금 기권한다면 3위 확정. 다만 이 방해 밖에 아직도 남아있을 저희가 미미한 변수들도. 문제는
알기만 하겐 최선의 시.
저 양반 말수도 적고 이런 소꿉 장난보단
자리를 말.
의외인데 이런 부질없는 노름 소식이 없던 그
외롭고 궁하였으나 인덕이
누구를 여기 오는 게 어찌된 자신의 잘못된 이제 와서
소섭이라 그가
이록 대관원과는 그래
가주에게 필요한 덕목이라 하면 그것은 곧 가주가 다스릴 홍원에 있어 필요한 것을 일컫는 말이다. 내가 이 홍원 죽이는 점 그런 구별을 무너뜨.
뜬구름 같은 소리. 홍원에 필요한 것.
너 또한 감히 말해보아라.
저놈에게 네 척도를 들이밀지 않는 편이 좋을 거다. 당장 자신에게 필요한 것이 무엇인지도 모르는 그럴싸한
네. 환용의 말이 맞아요.
가환이나 홍원의 다른 이들이 내린 결론만으로 너를 판단하지 않을 거다. 들을 것은 듣되 마지막에는 스스로 생각하여 내린 답만이 나의 도를 이룰 테니. 그러니 가보. 너 또한 타인의 결론에 흘러가는 대로 답하지 말아라.
차라리
지금의 상황에서 대묻기만 한다는 것은 형국을 잊지 못한다는 뜻인데.
All right. One sent data packet to the.
Oh god, I accidentally started a YouTube video somewhere. I'm glad I found them.
야,
지금 이 난세에서 힘이
자로야. 다시 묻겠.
저는 형님이 제게 어떤 대답을 바라시는지.
이건 내가 그 귀함을
형님은 저에게 기대하시는 바가
기대라. 잘못 품게 그럼에도 오래전부터 준비해왔던
I'm just
모든
gonna
것이
skip the rest of it. I've already heard all the dialogue. I just haven't beaten the fucker yet. Hmm.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지.
기세가 좋군. 밝은 달 아래 맑은 바람이라도 쐬는 표정이야. 기아들.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 깊게 다친 지성에
기회를 잡았네! 희청이는 저자를 꺾어 넘긴다면 저들의 사기가 떨어질 것이 뻔하지! 돌격하세!
Oh, there we go. I got worried there for a second.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라.
이제야 실력을 좀 내시네요. 평소에도 이러면 얼마나 좋습니까?
그래. 그렇게 시원하게 처리하니 보는
달빛조차
맛이 나는
잘려나갈 올고든 하나.
일 처리는 빠르게 하는 편이
한 수
덜
배웠네.
답답한 법이지.
I actually wanted to see what win rate would do. pretty sure I can ignore that guy this
어두운
turn.
무지를 열어젖히라. 함께 열어젖힌다. 함께 열어젖힌다. 함께 열어젖힌다.
걱정은 하지 않겠습니다. 어차피 이미 이길 거라고 확신하고 있으실 테니까.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 함께 열어젖힌다.
Okay, this is where things get interesting.
나는 한숨 쉬어도 되겠는가?
Okay.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 직접 열어드리죠.
배워라, 묘.
이 기회에 평소 지휘 실력을 확인해보죠, 따태. 하던 대로 해보십시오.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 환상의 세계로 들어가보죠.
두려움을 모르는 건 나쁘지 않습니다만 또 무식하게 돌격하실 거라면 전 빠지겠습니다.
I can win them all. Ooh, I got it. Okay, I know what I'm doing. Oh, no.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 직접 하! 열어드리죠. 직접 하! 열어드리죠.
헤어라 묘.
I chose the right one.
뒤로 무릎 수단은 이제 남지 않았네. 그저 발검하여 앞으로 맞설 뿐. 무레배들에게 차가운 검격을.
아하.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라.
Okay, that's fine.
직접 하! 열어드리죠.
헤어라 묘.
직접 하! 열어드리죠.
헤어라 묘.
Nope, I messed up.
긴장 체력 싸움. 그 꼴이 나잖냐.
I messed up.
진리를 열기 위해
귀하들의 위력에 겁이라도 먹은 게지. 마음이 꺾인 모양이야.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라.
Okay. That one was just. I really was hoping that they weren't gonna have a green from straight from the get go.
진리를 열기 위해
귀하들의 위력에 겁이라도 먹은 게지. 마음이 꺾인 모양이야.
Oh, damn it. Damn it, damn it, damn it.
진리를 열기 위해
귀하들의 위력에 겁이라도 먹은 게지. 마음이 꺾인 모양이야.
I just need them to not have their green skill. This'll be fine as long as they don't have their green skill on the first fucking turn. Okay. It doesn't really matter.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라.
Okay.
그래. 끝나면 맛있는 소리 기다릴 테니까. 표정 좋아진 거 봐라. 아.
Oh, this sucks.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라.
Yep.
진리를 열기 위해
의심, 암귀, 불안과 공포 그런 것들이 들끓을 때가 가장 취약하죠. 알아듣겠습니까? 지금이 적기라는 것입니다.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 진리를 열기 위해
어버이의 그 유치한 말투도 도움이 될 때가 있네요. 화가 나서 제대로 된 판단이 안 서는 모양입니다.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 직접 열어드리죠.
그간의 전투 경험이 있어요.
Oh, nice. That's annoying.
좋지였습니다.
Oh, I don't like either of these.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라.
I'm gonna try a new strategy if this doesn't work out here.
이거는
Yeah, it didn't work out.
보이셨다고 저런 것 좀.
진리를 열기 위해
어버이의 그 유치한 말투도 도움이 될 때가 있네요. 화가 나서
Oh, never
제대로 된
mind.
판단이 안 서는 모양입니다.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 진리를 열기 위해
의심,
God
암기,
damn it.
불안과 공포.
I am really
그런
just
것들이 들끓을 때가
not
가장
getting
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라.
알아듣겠습니까? 지금
any luck here.
이라는 것입니다.
Okay, okay.
그래. 끝나면
No,
맛있는
thank
소리
God.
기다릴 테니까. 표정 좋아진 거 봐라. 아, 내가 산 건 아니다.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라.
빈틈투성이네. 금방 잡아 족치고 지나갈 수 있겠는걸.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 직접 열어드리죠.
빈틈투성이네. 금방 잡아 족치고 지나갈 수 있겠는걸.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 직접 열어드리죠.
그래, 그렇게 시원하게 처리하니 보는 맛이
진지성에
이 처리는 빠르게
진지성에
덜 답답한 법이지.
운전의 위대한 일격을 기록하는 중간에 이따가 버스에서 회고해야 하지 않겠는가?
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 열어젖힌다.
걱정은 하지 않겠습니다. 어차피 이미 이길 거라고 확신하고 있으실 테니까.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 열어젖힌다.
Here we go.
저기는 땅에 떨어졌네. 이제 우리를 누가 막겠는가?
Do this real fast.
어두운
Hello,
무지를
Reaper.
열어젖히라. 직접 열어드리죠.
헤어라 묘.
뒤로 물을 수단은 이제 남지 않았네. 그저 발검하여 앞으로 맞설 뿐. 무레배들에게 차가운 검격을.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 직접 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠.
그건 무슨 손이 미끄러진 것인가?
위에서 당신을 관리자로 정한 데에는 합당한 이유가 있겠지. 기대하고 있겠습니다, 단테.
Probably do this one. That covers everything.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지요. 직접 하! 열어드리죠. 직접 하! 열어드리죠.
헤어라 묘.
No, I don't like.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 직접 하! 열어드리죠. 직접 하! 열어드리죠.
헤어라 묘. 헤어라 묘.
귀하들의 전투에 남부가 있기를 기원한다.
Ooh, okay, this is gonna be fun. No, okay. That. Do I just take the Thunder Strike? Okay, if we win rate this. Oh. Just gonna do this.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지. 환상의 세계로 들어가 보죠.
지휘 실력을 확인해보죠, 단테. 하던 대로 해보십시오.
I was clinching a little bit there.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지요. 직접 열어드리죠.
헤어라, 묘.
Okay. Fuck! I missed one!
진리를 열기 위해
저들도 내가 물을 싫어하듯 극도로 기피하는 것이 있었군.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지요.
입 밖으로 꺼내는 것이 매섭군요.
Nope.
진리를 열기 위해
I don't like this. I have to keep re-rolling. I could wait. Let me actually try something real fast. Back checkpoint. Oh, that's probably fine. Herschel. Let's do Fire Fist Office. Specifically, I'm not looking at. I'm looking at their passives. No, that's not good. That's not good enough. Twin hooks. Ah, damn it. I don't have that at tier 3. Fuck. Ooh, okay. Molar. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's fine. That's kind of useless. Yeah, I'll do rupture. Does D-Shay even do rupture? Sinking, sinking, sinking. No no rupture. Okay. Oh, I already know I need to keep. For that right there. That's not helpful. That is also not helpful. Damn. play with deleted 20% damage of head coins. What did the ring Pontilius give? That's actually probably better.
진리를 열기 위해.
That is probably better. I wish I had more options, but you know,
어버이의 그 유치한 말투도 도움이 될 때가 있네요. 화가 나서 제대로 된 판단이 안
어두운
서는
무지를
모양입니다.
열어줬지라.
damn it. That's just unlucky that they got so many head flips.
진리를 열기 위해.
It's a gamble. It's a gamble what happens here.
저들도 내가 물을 싫어하듯 극도로 기피하는 것이 있었군.
입 밖으로 꺼내는 것도 조금 매스껍네.
진리를 열기 위해.
어버이의 그 유치한 말투도 도움이 될 때가 있네요. 화가 나서 제대로 된 판단이 안 서는 모양입니다.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지.
Okay, this has to be the ideal. Start here.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 직접 열어드리죠.
절묘한 하나비였고
간당 목숨줄만 붙어있군. 곧 끝장날 수 있을 것 같은데
어두운 무지를
소감자
열어줬지라.
효율적인 마무리를
직접
명령하시겠지요.
열어드리죠. 어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 밝게 열어줬신다. 깊게 닫힌 지성을 깊게 닫힌 지성을.
이제야 실력을 좀 내시네요. 평소에도 이러면 얼마나
Oh, that sucks. I messed up there.
올거든 하나. 훌륭하군. 한 수 배웠네.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 밝게 열어줬신다.
폴린이 방금 무엇을 본 것인가? 엄청나게 강한 일격을.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 직접 밝게 열어줬신다.
뭐냐? 너는 좀 자질이 있는데 나중에 따로 술 좀 할래.
저기는 땅에 떨어졌네. 이제 우리를 누가 막겠는가?
That's better.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라.
This first turn here, I'm not really gonna think about it.
헤어라, 묘.
어떤 상황이 닥쳐도 포기하지 마세라. 저들의
Okay.
공격은
Now I need to actually start thinking about how I do things.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라.
That sucks.
헤어라, 묘.
자, 동료들이여, 자세를 갖추고 저들을 맞이하세. 우리를 가로막는 저 시련을 해치우고 끝나지 않는 모험을 향하여.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 열어드리죠.
베어라 묘.
환상의 세계로 들어가보죠.
베어라 묘.
왜 자꾸 이상한 걸 달고 오시는 건지. 유물 사기라도 당하신 겁니까? 또
어두운 무지를 열어주지라. 직접 열어드리죠.
베어라 묘.
Damn it! Give me a second. Oh, you know what? While I'm gonna do that, let's do this.
So I'm sure many of you have heard of Jason
Let me watch this
Cornwall,
real
better
fast.
known online as Pirate Software, due to all the surrounding drama related to Stop Killing Games. This video isn't about the Stop Killing Games drama. I do support the Stop Killing Games initiative, and anyone in the EU currently watching this should go and sign up to care about game preservation. This video is going to be a review of Jason's job history, game dev industry claims, coding ability, and his heartbound and champion of breakfast DRM solutions by me, a developer. I won't be touching on his hacking skills much in this video, since from what I found, all of his DEF CON wins were team efforts, and all of the stories related to hacking are just that, stories. Outside of his word, I generally can't find anything related to it. There isn't anything concrete or of substance in these stories for me to actually analyze and review. If anyone knows where he actually has hacking write-ups or knows the VODs
I'm gonna
where
be
he actually
giving
does
my
something
2
related to
cents
hacking,
during
let me
this.
know and I can do a separate video going through and reviewing it. Okay, with that out of the way, let's start with Jason's LinkedIn job history. So, if we look at his LinkedIn, we can see his first recorded job experience is from 2002 to 2009, where he was a freelance security researcher and developer. In 2002, Jason would have been 15, and from what I found, he hasn't taken any program classes, so anything he knows at this point is largely self-taught. Another important thing is Jason actually had a job at security
Okay, so freelance security researcher and developer. Researcher and developer it's a very wide claim. Because during this time, the only type of security that we knew that he did... Well, we'll get there later in the video.
Developer. In 2002, Jason would have been 15, and from what I found, he hasn't taken any program classes, so anything he knows at this point is largely self-taught. Another important thing is Jason actually had a job in 2004 that isn't listed here as a quality assurance intern at Blizzard.
I went to Blizzard in 2004, and this is kind of my whole career, right? My first job I got through nepotism, 100%. My dad worked at Blizzard.
Nepo baby, he's gonna backtrack eventually and say that it wasn't nepotism.
For 23 years. He worked at Blizzard for 23 years, so I got a job there in 2004. I was shit. I was shit at this, and I realized I was shit.
Also, I think it's important that we talk about his dad for a second. Jason says his dad just worked at Blizzard, but that's grossly understating his dad's role and history at Blizzard. Jason's dad is Joey Ray Hall, and from a Reddit AMA his dad held, we can see the following. Joey Ray joined Silicon and Synapses in 1991.
By the way, his dad is awesome.
Now, you might be asking what's Silicon and Synapses and what does this have to do with Blizzard in his post? Well, in 1991, Blizzard didn't exist yet. Silicon and Synapses was the original company name, and 1991 was the year it was founded. Joey Ray joined Blizzard before it was Blizzard, and when he joined, there were less than 10 people in total at the company. He wasn't some random Blizzard employee. He was one of the earliest hires at the company. Over his 23 years, he did all sorts of work, and was the one that founded the cinematic team, led the machinima team, the video and post-production team, and the esports live broadcast team. Plus being responsible for all the video content for every BlizzCon between 2005 to 2014. Plus, he led the team that made the famous South Park World of Warcraft episode and the inspiration for the He Who Has No Life character. Joey Ray was the director of cinematics at Blizzard. He wasn't some low-level employee that worked at the company. He was pretty high up in the chain. Anyways, back to Jason.
The next 5 years, I left Blizzard. I did not reapply, and I went and worked on my own. I did freelance. I did freelance for everything. So I actually went into Second Life, which is a 3D Worlds game, if you've never played it before. They have a language in it called Linden Scripting Language, and I made games in there. I learned how to do 3D modeling, I learned how to do texture work, I learned how to do scripting, I learned how to engage with people that were playing my games, I learned how to do network model stuff, I learned how to do server-related stuff. I did this for 5 whole years.
So Jason's Second Life period of time is a huge rabbit hole, and there's like 5 or 6 different controversies surrounding his time in Second Life. This video isn't about his controversies and allegations.
Bro, Second Life is something else.
The only small parts we care about are related to coding. During his Second Life playing time, he played a character known as Moldavia's Fig Tree and started a company called Dark Sphere Creations. He claims he did game program with the Linden scripting language, the programming language of Second Life, and made some small games and some user-generated content for Second Life. While digging into this, I didn't find any proof he coded any games. What Dark Sphere Creations and his company was actually doing at the time was creating not safe for work adult furry avatars and selling them. Basically, his friend Wingless Emote, another Second Life player, would do the art and modeling for the furry avatars, and Jason would do some coding on top. What kind of coding he did on top of these avatars isn't exactly clear. Then they would sell the avatars, and eventually the business was making somewhere around $10,000 a month, primarily due to selling these avatars. There's some other
I do want to say this because I had Shiro on earlier. I don't know if she's still here or not. But Second Life modeling is not hard. Shiro should know because she has spent so much fucking time in Second Life.
controversy where it alludes to Jason trying to do dev work on Linden Labs projects and other game worlds, but I can't find any solid proof, just random posts and accusations. So in summary, there doesn't seem to be any proof he did any kind of game development or hacking during this period of time. Let's get back to Jason.
Then I came back to Blizzard in 2009 and I applied. Not having his help in any way, I got the job.
Okay, the timeline here starts matching up with his LinkedIn. After his little detour with Darkspear Creations and working for himself, Jason now has an actual full-time job at Blizzard in 2009. This is his first official full-time job at Blizzard, and he is once again a quality assurance analyst. Jason claims he got into the company on his own merits this time, but I find that a bit hard to believe at face value. In 2004, he said he was terrible at his QA role, and that's why he quit. I searched to see if he studied anything IT related in high school or in college or during the time gap, and I found this from his subreddits. Jason did spend some time in college studying to be an entomologist with a specialization in ants. He dropped out of college without ever finishing his studies, and it doesn't seem like he ever took any IT related courses during this time here. During that 5-year gap between 2004 and 2009, the only experience he said in the clip from earlier was his Second Life programming, and well, that wasn't exactly quality assurance or hacking or game development work. Plus, while applying in 2009, on his resume he would probably have had, or Blizzard itself would have had, a record he worked there previously as a QA, so that would make applying a second time for a similar position easier. His dad, once again, was a pretty high person in the company, and some people might remember Jason being Joey Ray's son from before. It's not impossible he got in on his own merits, just a bit hard to believe considering he doesn't have experience with any real program languages at this point, and he doesn't have any degrees or certificates. Okay, back to his LinkedIn and his job. So he held the role for 3 years and 2 months, and once again this was his quality assurance role. One thing Jason often does is he claims all QA are developers. First, as someone that has worked QA myself, this isn't true. I'm not saying QA aren't important, but the majority of QA generally are non-technical and only a small portion are. At most of the places I worked at, QA generally has no coding ability and are tasked with doing manual regression testing. Basically, they get a series of test cases they need to go through, and each test case has a written out set of instructions they just follow. If something doesn't match the case steps, then a bug is filed and actual developers are tasked with addressing it. So I personally wouldn't call his 3 years at this position game development experience. And if we look at the bullet points he has on his LinkedIn, besides one line, namely the design and create an automated system, there's nothing here that even remotely implies he was coding or doing any kind of development. I'm making this point since Jason often claims he was a game developer at Blizzard for 7 years, but his first 3.5 years didn't include any developer roles. Also, to address his if QA didn't do their jobs, games wouldn't be released argument, most games have music. If a musician doesn't complete the OST, a game can't be released. Does that mean they're now developers too? Just because you say something confidently in a deep voice doesn't make it true. Moving on to his next role, we have quality assurance.
That's something I didn't even think
He mentions
about
he did some
my
forensic
game.
analysis and detected threats. Also, something I'd like to note, all of his game projects listed here were coded using primarily the C++ programming language. This is a low-level programming language. This will be important a bit later in the video.
Okay, wait, I'm gonna explain this before he does. Low-level and high-level programming languages don't mean what you think they mean. A low-level language isn't low-level because it's easy to use. Low-level specifically means that it is harder for a human to read it. High-level programming languages are where it's easier for a human to read it. The reason why C++ is used so widely is because it's fast. Whereas Python, which is easier to read, I'm talking specifically for games, isn't used as much because it's a slower language.
As for the role, again, I wouldn't call this game development experience. This is more related to security work than game development itself. And from the bullet points,
He does mention
it
that
doesn't seem
later
like
on.
Jason was doing much coding. His next role for 6 months was test engineer. My opinions are pretty much the same as the previous role he held. Moving on, we have the next role
Yeah,
as security
honestly
engineer for 11
speaking,
months. This one is interesting. Since the
This one has more to do with my, with what I know.
Let's start diving into the DRM analysis for Pirate Software's two
Watch
games,
this one.
Champions of Breakfast and Heartbound. Let's start with some information about the two games and clear up some misinfo too. Both Champions of Breakfast and Heartbound were created in the Game Maker engine. Champions of Breakfast is the game Jason claims has the unpiratable DRM.
I tried to find a way so that our game wouldn't get pirated because it'd be easy to pirate it. This is your save file. First start the game up, it actually checks what achievements you have and it unlocks powers based on your achievements.
He's absolutely lying, by the way. He is lying through his teeth right now.
This is actually the save file for the character, so you can't pirate it because you can never use the achievements. It made it unpiratable, which is deeply hilarious.
So, as you saw, essentially the DRM for Champions of Breakfast is the Steam achievements acting as a quasi-save file. The Heartbound DRM is the following code snippet that Jason has shown live on stream.
By the way, okay, so these are if statements. If statements are one of the basics of coding. Actually, I have... If statements are literally part of every coding language. I have... Give me just a moment. I have to find it. My Python crash course book. This is what I used when I was going to school for computer support. Here are those pages. Let me find it. Getting started. Variables, introducing lists, working with lists, if statements. Chapter 5 is if statements. That is how basic if statements are. It is literally part of the basics. By the way, Chapter 5 is out of 11. It's Chapter 5 of 11. Because everything after Chapter 11 are projects. Not that all the projects work.
Multiple times. Now, recently, a lot of people have been posting that Heartbound has always online DRM. That is false. Heartbound does not have always online DRM. The DRM approach does not require online connectivity to function. It'll work just fine with Steam in offline mode. Jason has told the truth in regards to this matter, so he doesn't deserve the online DRM hate he's getting currently. Second, the Steam achievements acting as a save file is only in Champions of Breakfast. Heartbound does not have any dependence on Steam achievements. These are two completely separate DRM solutions. Now, let's start analyzing the Heartbound DRM code. The important...
Sorry, when I said he was lying, I wasn't talking about the Steam list. I was talking about the DRM proof. About being pirating proof. Yeah, I wasn't talking about the Steam achievements. That's not a lie. I should have clarified what I was saying.
Variable we need to pay attention to within the code is on line 3, the global.piratedGame variable that is set to 1. Like the variable name suggests, this is what dictates whether or not the game is considered pirated within the game itself. A value of 1 implies the variable has a truthy value. Normally for this type of thing, we'd use a boolean and use true and false as the variable values directly, but we'll leave that aside for now and touch on it again in the code review.
Honestly, yeah, true or false would have been better here. A 1 or a 0 is kind of stupid.
Section. If we continue and move on to line 5, we can see the DRM process goes as follows. First, we check to see if Steam is initialized. Once if it's confirmed to be true, the game is considered legitimate, hence line 7. Then at line 13, we check to see if the Steam client is actually a Steam emulation or crack. The double equal sign means we're checking to see if the value of this function is equal to the ASCII string IGG Games. IGG Games is an unsafe piracy group, and they use their name when they package their cracked Steam games. Then we set the game to pirated on line 14 if we confirm it's an IGG Games cracked copy of the game. Now, we move on to line 16 where we check to see if there's a bogus account ID. We also, on line 19, check to see if we have a known Steam app ID that is commonly used.
I will say, this isn't even the most egregious part of his code.
Using cracks or playing pirated games or mods. If either one of these checks end up being true, we also set the pirated game variable to true. Now, in order for us to break this DRM, the first two problems we have to deal with is the function call of Steam initialized and the Steam DRM that would be included with the actual game. Steam DRM is Steam's own added-on DRM. It is completely separate from the Heartbound DRM we're discussing. Due to legal reasons, I'm not going to directly show what programs to use or how to bypass Steam functions in Steam DRM, but I'll explain a bit about the process and how secure using Steam functions as a form of DRM is. First, let's talk about the Steam DRM. The Steam DRM has been well understood by cracking groups for a very long time. It's so well understood and commonly cracked, there are multiple tool sets built for it and guides, to the point even non-technical users can use them to crack and distribute their own Steam games. This is called home riffs, and this is one of the reasons there's so many Steam games that have day one cracks floating around. Next, we have the Steam functions that we saw in the Heartbound DRM code that we need to address for the Champions of Breakfast DRM. For this issue, let's talk about Steam client emulators. These are programs that mimic some legitimate Steam client functions and fake some of the other other functionality you expect in the legitimate Steam client. There are numerous Steam client emulators, and I'm not going to touch any of these emulators, but take my word for it that they can easily get through the Steam DRM and the initialized function check. And they can also mimic the Steam Achievement API, meaning not only can the Steam DRM be bypassed by using these emulators, but they would also allow you to crack and play Champions of Breakfast, plus you'd basically have a save game editor along with the two. While we're on the topic of Champions of Breakfast, I was curious how long it took for the game with the unpiratable DRM to be cracked after it was released, and this is what I found. 1 day and 17 hours after the game was released on Steam, there was already a home rip floating around. If you don't consider home rips to be valid, I also checked to see if any known Where's scene groups had a crack for the game. The scene group Simplex has also had a crack for the game floating around for years at this point, so that unpiratable DRM has been soundly defeated multiple times just after launch. Now, with those problems addressed, let's return to the Heartbound DRM code and examine the last problem we figured out how to break, namely the IGG games check and the various ID checks setting the pirated game variable to true. In order to break this, we're going to do some reverse engineering. To make this reverse engineering and cracking process smoother to explain, I've copied over this snippet of code into a tiny C++ program. The DRM I have in it is in the left pane between lines 13 to 51. Now, you might notice I have a couple functions here between lines 15 to 33. Those are just placeholders. Due to legal reasons, I'm not including the real Steam SDK or functions in my tiny program, or including it within the actual reverse engineering process. Since I already explained how they can be defeated, it's not important to include them in the program. Back to our code, you can see the rest of the DRM matches up basically one-to-one with the DRM snippet we have from Heartbound. Last line to note, I run the DRM check here on line 108 just after the program starts. The rest of my program code doesn't matter too much. I'm basically just using the Windows native Win32 API to create a simple window that will have a red background if the game is pirated, and if it's a legitimate copy, the background will be green. Also, just like the Heartbound DRM code, we start the program assuming to be in a pirated state. Now, I compiled the little app we have, and we have an exe we can run. Let's pretend we don't have the actual source code and just have the exe. So, how do we modify this exe and beat the DRM? In order to modify this exe, we'll need to use what is known as a disassembler plus a debugger. I'll be using Ollie Debug, which is a very old and outdated X8.
There are a bunch of free ones online. There are also some paid ones. The free ones work just as well as the paid ones for the most part for debuggers.
86 debugger. If someone was doing actual reverse engineering these days, the tools they would look for and use would probably be something like EDA Pro or Ghidra, a reverse engineering tool built by the NSA and freely available on GitHub to download and use. Anyways, let's open up Ollie Debug and attach a little DRM test application and see what we get. So here in the main window, we have something that is called assembly. This is normally the lowest low-level programming language used and is very tightly corresponds to machine code. And these are the instructions your computer or phone CPU is actually executing when you're using a program. The other window panes don't matter at all for our purposes, so we can ignore them. Next, I'm going to run this program as just a simple smoke test to make sure everything's working as we expect it to. Namely, we see the red background and the pirate game detected stuff we expect from our DM. I don't need the live attached process info, so I'll close the app and return to the view we had originally when we opened the exe. Now, remember earlier how I mentioned IGG games was an ASCII string? Well, that's what we're going to search for. Since the string isn't obfuscated and will be in plain text, we can easily search for it and hunt it down. Alright, I see 2 IGG game strings in our search. Let's just go and open the first one and see what code is there. The first function looks similar to our stub function in our C++ code. The second IGG game strings is just a bit beneath, so let's look at that. Now we see something interesting, notably the D word pointer and the line ending with 0. If we look just a few more lines below, we see more D word pointer lines, except these ones end with 1. I hope everyone is catching on and you realize these are the lines of our original C++ source code setting the pirated game variable. Now, since we already know this is the DRM function, what happens if we change the values in those lines below to 0? With all that changed, let's try running our little application again, and we've successfully cracked the DRM, since now the pirated game variable at every point in our program code will always report back false. Now, I'm sure many of you watching have questions and concerns, stuff like, what if Pirate never shared the DRM code? You wouldn't be able to do this so easily and quickly. Or maybe something like, your app was made in C++, Heartbound is made in GameMaker, so the output files and structure would be different. First, let's pretend we didn't know what the DRM code looked like and we're doing a real blind reverse engineering attempt at cracking the DRM. Let's go through this scenario. Let's assume we already have the original game files, now we open the game, and let's say we're using one of those Steam client emulators I mentioned from earlier in the video. Let's say we're playing through Heartbound and trying to find information to use to actually crack it. Well, we're in luck, since Heartbound has a piracy message. If you somehow manage to pull this exact scenario I'm describing, here's a screenshot from a user that owns a legitimate copy of the game, and they managed to trigger this pirate message on their Steam Deck, meaning 2 things. 1, the DRM is so bad it has false positive activations, which I find funny, and 2, we have our unique identifiable, mostly unobfuscated ASCII string to search for in our debugger. The pirate message string is unique enough that we can use it to hunt down the DRM code within the debugger. The reason being, in order for the message to appear, it has to either be checking the pirated game variable or as close to the DRM check check function, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to be triggered. In either case, we have enough info from this alone to hunt down the DRM and break it, even if we didn't have the original DRM.
I know,
for
right?
reference. Now, let's talk about the C++ versus GameMaker issue. GameMaker is a game engine, and it has its own process of packaging up a game built together and will include much more files than just a single exe. You might think this would make the cracking process more difficult, but the exact opposite is actually true. The reason is GameMaker builds are something that is well understood, and there are lots of decompilation tools. You might remember me using the term compilation earlier in the video, so let me explain these two terms a bit more clearly now. When you have, for example, our C++ source code and you're trying to turn it into an executable the computer can run.
Also, let me put it this way. I fully believe that you should support indie developers. But I also understand that not everyone can afford a game. So, if my game gets pirated later on, more than likely I'm not going to go after the pirate. For reasons that Reaper and Shiro have both heard me say before.
It's called compilation, the process of turning code into instructions the computer can actually understand and can execute. Decompilation is the process
exactly,
in reverse.
like the
You have
Ultra
some
Kill
kind of application,
developer.
and you're trying to convert it back into what the original source code looked like, meaning you can use a decomp tool on the GameMaker build and get back GameMaker language code that it looks somewhat close to the original source code, which also means you'd have an easier time hunting down the DRM code since it's easier to reason about in a GameMaker language than it is in raw assembly. So the C++ reverse engineering example I demonstrated is actually harder and more worst case scenario, relatively speaking, to trying and figure out the crack. Now, to the last question everyone might have, what if that pirated game variable didn't exist and you couldn't change the value to 0? Well, nothing changes even if that was the case. Why? Well, the DRM is so stupidly simple and there isn't any application security measures to prevent reverse engineering or tampering with it.
Honestly, calling it a DRM is kind of stupid. That's how simple it is.
We could have just ripped out the entire DRM function and left it empty. We could have found the places the DRM checks were called and removed them instead. Regardless of what we chose, there's at least a few dozen working options to pick from. And all of this also applies to the actual Heartbound game, not just to the tiny C++ program I wrote. To be thorough, I'll also cover some application security measures that could be added and some DRM measures. But I'll keep it light and just at a high level overview, since diving into those is way too out of scope for this video. First of all, let's go back to our C++ source code. Something we could add to prevent Ollie debug from opening up our exe would be to add the native Win32 function isDebugger present. Yes, that one line would help stop some of the simplest debuggers from opening the exe. Next, we could also add something called string obfuscation, meaning we don't need stuff like IGG Games or the YAR pirate message and easy to search for format. By obfuscating and having a special function to decode the real strings, we could have prevented the search string stuff we did in the cracking process. Another simple thing we could do is what's called a checksum. Basically, we can have our own application look at part of itself and generate a special result from that. So in the case if someone tried to crack the application by removing the DRM, the application portion being checked would be different, meaning the checksum generated now would be different from what's expected and as a result would fail. These are fairly common additional layers of defense for programs to help prevent tampering with the distributed program by end users. Alright, with all that, I think we can start wrapping up this DRM analysis.
Oh god.
Every bot that worked for every MMO that we worked on, everything at Blizzard, grabbed every single one of those, pulled it out into assembly, grabbed the code cave from it, removed the polymorphic.
The section is pretty long, so we'll save breaking down the code cave and polymorphic code comments and nonsense, and his comments to VX Underground for maybe a part 3 video related to his hacking claims. The only part from here we need to care about for now is Jason has confirmed to have done reverse engineering and gone through and read assembly, similar to what we did earlier. That was another reason I chose to use C++ and Ollie debug, since those would have been the language and tool he would have been using during his time period at Blizzard or earlier, as those were some common choices back then. Now, while in part 1 I leaned towards distrust, but I gave him the benefit of doubt on a few of his hacking points, I think it's clear to see Jason doesn't seem to know a whole lot on how to create a secure application or how to set up a real custom DRM solution. And while this entire video I've been referring to all this as DRM, it really doesn't deserve to be called as such. I can fairly confidently say Jason barely has any application hacking knowledge that you would expect someone to have with his supposed history and experience. So the fact he doesn't even seem to understand any of these concepts or problems makes me fairly confident confident saying his reverse engineering and assembly claims are mostly made up stories or complete and outright lies. Let's leave the DRM stuff behind us now and move towards the code reviews. Before I start doing the reviews themselves, let me give some additional context. If you watched part 1, you would know Jason supposedly started doing dev stuff in 2002, meaning at this point in 2025, he has 23 years of experience programming. When he started working on his first game, Champions of Breakfast, he had somewhere around 13 years of experience. So when he started seriously working on Heartbound, he should have been very familiar with GameMaker and the GameMaker language. Also, he's the owner of the game studio and the only person who's ever touched the code on the Heartbound game. So I don't want to hear any nonsense like his code's bad on purpose for job security, or someone else wrote the garbage code and he inherited and has to maintain it. Lastly, all the code we're going to look at is modern and should still be in the game, based on what I could find from his live streams. So this is a reflection of his current abilities. I'll be saving all my comments related to Jason's coding abilities for after I finish all the code reviews. Also, let me break down my criteria and rules I set for myself so everyone understands why I chose these code snippets and how I'll be offering advice and comments on them. First off, the code snippet had to be something I had confirmed to be shown on Jason's streams. I had a ton of people sending me code snippets in text over the last few days, so while it might be Jason's code, if I couldn't confirm it, I decided to skip it for the sake of fairness. So every code snippet we'll review today is something I could personally verify has been shown on one of his streams and is legitimate Heartbound code. Second off, the code needs to be a reoccurring problem or have significant impact on a large part of the code base. So I won't be reviewing some throwaway script on some small unimportant object, like some random tree object that has an attached script. This I think is kind of pointless to review, so I skip those kind of super low hanging fruits. Thirdly, unless I absolutely have to, I won't drastically change the code. I'll offer solutions and improvement paths that can be taken to make the current code reach some junior level baseline of quality. Also, I'll limit my advice to things that are possible in the GameMaker language and engine. So design patterns and practices that are possible in other engines or languages, but not easily doable or possible in GameMaker, I'll be skipping. Fourth, I largely won't be talking about performance. We're just trying to get the code to something readable that a real development team could realistically understand and work on. Having performance discussion and talking about entirely different data structures and game design patterns is too far removed from the topics of this video. Plus, the Heartbound game is extremely
You ever
simple,
use a sword
so
to kill a spider?
Truly matter. Fifth,
That's
if
what
I
I
basically
just
covered
did.
all the issues another code snippet would have, I won't cover the other similar snippets. Basically, there are like
I
100
used
files
the
with the exact
pommel,
same problems and
then
issues.
pommel
So if I
struck
address
it.
the issues other code snippets would have during the other snippet reviews, I'll skip over anything too similar so this video isn't stupidly long and repetitive. Yes, there's that many problems with the code base. I felt I needed to add these rules and criteria. With all that out of the way, let's start with some actual code reviews. We'll bring back the DRM snippet and we'll open up a few other snippets as well. If you remember at the start
I
of the video,
refuse
talked
to
about
buy
two key
Heartbound so I
impulsive
could
values
go
on the
in
prior
and
to
look
game
at the
variable,
code
and I
itself
brought up the
because
term Booleans.
there are
Booleans a
ways
basic
that I can
data
pull
type
out
in
the
nearly
code.
all programming languages, and you would use the values of true and false directly when you're checking to see if a variable is
There are many
true or
ways.
false. So if we look at these code snippets, we can see Jason is using 0 or 1 in numerous places instead of using the appropriate data types and values. This is a sign of a more amateur
But I'm
programmer.
not
I just wanted to
spending the
clear this
money
up
on
now,
Heartbound.
so we won't have to repeat this in every single code snippet we look at. Now, let's drill down into a specific code snippet. We'll start with the one from the bottom left. Alright, so the very first line, we already have a lot of issues here. So Jason is accessing a storyline flag in a single dimensional global array using a raw index number of 367. Both of those things are terrible, but let
I'm
me
not
explain what an array
wasting
is
my
first.
money.
Arrays are a basic data structure that stores a collection of elements. Let's go through a quick example. Imagine you have a row of boxes, and inside each box you have the number. To access a number inside a specific box, you would use what's called an index value. In GameMaker, array indexes start at 0. Another nice thing with arrays, there are lots of functions built into your programming language, making it much nicer to work with. Arrays are a basic program concept and near universal in all languages. Now, let's deal with the index number 367. This is what we call a magic number. Magic numbers in programming are when you use a number directly to check or access something, and there's no way for someone reading it to have any idea what it could possibly mean or refer to without someone else explaining the intent or finding a different file that might hold the context needed. Jason uses magic numbers across all his files and codebase. So for us to get context on this, let's pull up another code snippet that has the storyline, array comments, and logic. Okay, there's another huge issue with this code snippet too, something I'll refer to as code change blast radius. To better understand what blast radius is, let's imagine we're looking at lines with indexes of 207 and 208, dealing with something called middle storyline flags. Let's say one day we want to add another storyline flag or event for this section called middle. We have two options here. Option 1, we go to the end of this array and add in a completely unrelated area of the array, another middle event. So this array has something like 560 indexes, meaning if we added a new one at the end, our middle event flags would be indexes 207, 208, and 561. This is absolutely terrible since logic events that should be together are at completely random spots inside the array. This causes a whole host of issues. The code becomes difficult to reason about, the magic numbers become even more challenging to maintain and use. It's so obtuse that the odds of maintaining and using this code
This is
decreases
horrible.
the more this array is expanded on. So what's option 2? Well, it would be nicer if it was at line
This
209.
is something that
So
a guy
it's
in
logic groups
my
together, but in order to
class
do that,
did.
we need to bump all the other
So a guy in my class was making a choose your own adventure game. And this is something that he did for his choose your own adventure game. And he had something like 4,000 options for it. And oh my god, he did it this way. It took him a month. Like, he wrote the code and it worked in like 2 days. It took him a month of writing all of that, of everything else though. Like, it was ridiculous.
This by 1. So the old 209 would be 210, old 210 would be 211.
And after he was done, he said, yeah, I'm never
doing
doing it that way again.
Factor scenario. Since if we wanted to do that, we would have to go by hand and update every single index after 209 within this file. Then we'd have a near 100% code change blast radius. Since if we change those indexes, every other file using those storyline flags is going to need to update their index number by 1 if they're at the 209th index or greater. Essentially, the structure is so bad and unwieldy, it's basically impossible to maintain or extend in a good way as it is. Let's deal with the magic numbers first, then we'll discuss a better way to do the story flags. We have 2 options when it comes to the magic index numbers. We can use const values or enums. Const values are just a named variable with a value that will never change. Enums are a data type that contains its own list of named constants. Enums are a much nicer choice to work with, so we'll go with them. With this enum defined, we can update the global storyline array where index 207 and 208 are with the enum values. Now, isn't this better? Now we have some context for what the storyline array index is for. Plus, if we return to our previous code snippet, we could change all of these magic numbers into enum values. So 367 could be an enum forest value, 333 could be an enum value for a town, and the 1 and 2 that is Fern and Road could also use a character enum. Now we have our first code improvement. The storyline flag structure still isn't good, but we've reduced the blast radius of changes from the entire codebase to basically just 1 file. Since we have a nice abstraction away from the raw index number, we just need to update the enum and the storyline array to have new flag options without having to update the rest of the codebase. This also helps with something called developer experience, DX for short. GameMaker includes...
By the way, this is for our final projects. We each did something different. I can't remember what this one guy did. One of the guys did... I can't remember what he did. But the other guy, he did... God, what is it fucking called? I don't know why I can't think of what it's called. Why can I not think of what it's called? Oh yeah, the alien shooter game, you know, where you have the little ship on the bottom and you have to go back and forth and shoot the aliens that are coming down towards you. He did one of those. I also did one of those, except for he took his and then he took the one that he made for one of our assignments, yeah, Alien Invasion. He took the one that we did for our assignment and then made it into Galacta, where, you know, the aliens went faster and things like that. I made an infinite maze that got harder every time you completed a maze, and it was timed. He gave you like 2 minutes, which honestly, you would have to go up to like maze 60 before it really got hard.
An IDE, or Integrated Development Environment. Basically, an IDE helps you to code and easily refer to code and values across your codebase. So if we use, let's say, the enum example, and we started typing in middle and then dot, the IDE would show us the values under the middle enum, meaning we don't have to search for the file with the enum to see what values we can use under that specific enum. We also don't get a bunch of random type suggestions that don't apply to this situation. Having good DX is important when working in a team, and I'd argue critical if you're trying to build and program something solo in a reasonable amount of time. So we'll stop worrying about the snippet since it's half decent code quality now and workable. Now, let's return to the global storyline array. While our enum change is a huge improvement over the original state of this file, this still isn't exactly good. Now, before I offer a solution, let's see why Jason used the flat single dimensional array in the first place. So, according to Jason, he has a flat array because he wants all the values to be saved exactly the same way in the game's save file, so players can modify it. Well, his reasoning is kind of dumb. What kind of code structure you have and the save file format you want do not impact each other. Every single game that has a save file has something called serialization, which which is the process of taking your game structure and data and converting it into a format your game will know how to read and reassign the values into the correct places. This is serialization and deserialization respectively, and it's a basic concept when making a save file. This is literally a basic thing nearly every single game has. So yes, it's perfectly safe to not use the one-dimensional array here. Next, let's look at a save file. So every line has a random number value that's supposed to correspond to one of his array indexes. Since we know what the problem is and what we need to achieve, now let's actually code up a better solution. Let's start by changing the storyline array into a struct. A struct is a composite data type. Basically, it's just a variable that can hold other variables inside itself. Since we already know Heartbound has 5 chapters, I'll further split up the structs for the 5 chapters to have some separation of concerns. Here we can see what the structs look like. We have at the top level our chapter, then we have our area of that chapter, and finally within the 3rd level we have our storyline event. What's so nice with this approach is we can now ditch the enums entirely. We can access the storyline flags like this, for example, chapter 1, dot, middle, dot, Joe sunglasses. Not only is this incredibly clear on what value we're trying to access, but now we also have nearly no code change blast radius if we want to modify a flag or add a new one. The setup also makes it safer if we're working in a team, since now if any changes are made to any of these structs, you wouldn't cause cascading issues to the rest of the flags, as was the case with the raw index usage. While this is nicer to use, this isn't the only benefit. In GameMaker, it's incredibly easy to iterate through a struct. So what we can do for the save game logic is the following. We can take our struct, go through the key value pair, and since we know the depth level, we can nicely format the save
And
file
he
to
had
include
the
chapter,
fucking
the section,
goal
and the
to
story.
say that
For
Undertale
example,
was
here we can
badly
clearly see
coded.
which flag is
I mean,
for
it
Joe sunglasses.
is.
Another huge benefit
But you also
using
have to
these key
take
values
into
directly
account
from the structures.
Toby Fox
We added
had
some freedom to make
zero
refactors and code changes
experience
possible.
working with
Since we have
code,
the struct key inside the save file for the flag, in the future, if we wanted to change
Undertale
our code
was
order
made
of
in
flags
2
for adding new
years
ones, the
by
structure
him
of the save
alone.
file wouldn't matter. We'd still be able to easily read in the right values. I think this is an important thing to care about. Since the game Heartbound is still in early access, the odds of changes occurring to the various parts of the game are high. And with this save file approach, we're basically in the clear to be as wild with our code changes as we want, and still ensure every player that's keeping up with the game updates is never negatively impacted by them. Also, one other minor thing, I threw in the save file or version number at the top for example. This helps ensure if we're making drastic changes between game versions, you can easily check what version of the save file you have and internally how to update it. Basically, it's just a good practice to ensure players aren't impacted by the behind the scenes work and progress on the game. With this solution done, let's now look at the code comments from the original snippet. With their structure and clarity, we can start cutting out large portions of these comments. We could keep the value conditions since that seems fine. While on the topic of comments, let's pull up some of the other snippets again. The comment frequency is way too high in Jason's code. Code should be self-documenting. Comments are perfectly fine to add if there's some special conditions or some other oddities surrounding the code usage, but some of these code comments are just worthless. For example, here he comments what the function call is going to do. There's no surrounding code inside the brackets to affect the function, and there's no parameters. If this needs a comment to understand what it's going to do, that means you should be renaming your function, not adding a comment. Also, redundancy like question asked equals 1 and set stuff is just wasting screen space. Maybe Jason was adding this for his live viewers so they would have a reference what he was coding, but leaving this in afterwards I find questionable. Moving on to the next snippet, we have another array to look at, where Jason is manually setting each array element to mostly the same value. First of all, manually setting every single array index for hundreds of arrays is something I've never even seen an amateur developer do. It's also problematic in a few ways. Either the array should be initialized with values directly, then modified by using the right functions, or we should be using a for loop iterating over the length of an existing array and ensuring every index has a valid value if we're completely modifying it to something else. Let's make our code change first, then I'll break it down. So what I did here was I added what is called the for loop. What this loop is doing is it will start at the 0 index of our array, check to see if our current index value is less than the total number of indices in our array, then it'll execute the lines inside the brackets.
I know,
in our
right?
case, assign a value to the current index. Finally, it will increase our current index number and check the loop conditions again. If the condition is still true, it will keep executing the code within the brackets until either the condition isn't true or we explicitly break out of the loop. Then after we finish with this loop, we manually assign the 2 special index cases with the angry road voice value. Loops are another basic concept of programming. Now, why is this better? Well, for one thing, if we ever change the size of the array code in the future, this code will
Now,
still
the
be
problem
safe,
with
since the
loops,
array
there is a
length
problem
will
with
know the
loops.
exact right size of
You
the
can
array.
get
Also,
stuck
not having to
in a
write
loop.
A million lines of redundant code is nice too. Second, this is actually much safer and will reduce the likelihood of runtime errors, or what you as a player would know as a game crash. So what are runtime errors? Let's say we have another place in code trying to use the voice list, and let's say Jason thought he had 27 elements in his voice array instead of 26, and he was once again using his magic numbers to try and access index 27 of the road talk voice list. If we look at the original array list, it only goes up to array index 26. So what happens when you try to access an index that doesn't exist? Well, the game is going to crash. That's what's going to happen. This happens because accessing an array index is in code GameMaker GameMaker can verify ahead of time. So what happens is GameMaker will launch the game and execute the code up to that point. Once it hits the invalid index, the program will crash, since only at that point in time will it know the array index is invalid and there's no data there to access. Using our approach and the array functions, we can guarantee the full length of the array is accounted for and has values. We can also use the array last function too for the last valid index of an array. This doesn't guarantee the right character voice or expression will be used, but I still think it's preferable to have the wrong voice sound activated while the game is playing, instead of having the game crashing and the player losing who knows how much time or progress. Again, for loops and default initialization are very beginner level concepts and near universal in all programming languages.
Yep.
Alright, last snippet we're going to look at for this video. Here we have a gigantic switch statement with multiple repeating cases, and the total case amount being like 1,000 cases for one possible branch path. There's a second branch path where there's like another 100 switch cases inside it too. I think Jason might be trolling us with this one. Let's start with the simple improvement for the multiple cases that are exactly the same code. Normally when you have a constantly repeating code, you write a function to call it to reduce code duplication and to reduce the possibility of incorrectly copying code and introducing bugs into your program. So if we create a function to reduce the amount of repetition we do, there's a lot of benefits. First, it's a lot easier to read and manage the code and the various cases. Second, it reduces the possibility of doing something incorrectly, especially when you're doing the same step hundreds of times. Again, better developer experience too. If you have common behaviors in a function, you don't need to manually type out the steps for every common dialogue behavior. It also speeds up development. Since Heartbound is a primarily story-driven game, the more of these common functions you have, the faster you can make cutscenes and dialogue scripts. Now, how do we improve the 1000 switch case? Well, I thought about this for a while, and I think the fastest way to improve it is we take it and we throw it in the trash and never look at it again. I generally thought about this for quite a while. There's essentially no improving the structure. For most of these code reviews, I tried to never recommend anything too far removed from the current state of things, but this is generally such horrifically architected code, there's basically no real way to improve it without a complete rewrite of things. Generally, when working with dialogue or complex cutscenes, you'd be using a lot more things than just the raw strings themselves. An array of dialogue structs for the lines would be a fairly common approach, and we could skim through a quick example. So the struct data is pretty dependent on your game and needs, but a few things are fairly common across most games, like having the line itself, the character you want to show on screen, and a dialogue type. Generally, we'll have the event type dictate how to proceed. So a more simple example could be something like the following scenario. Here we have the dialogue array filled with structs, and each dialogue line is a struct in itself, and it tells us exactly what kind of dialogue event it is and what choice.
Yeah, this is absolutely better, by the way.
And actions are possible for it. This reduces our switch statement to a handful of cases depending on how many event types we end up having. Secondly, it provides a very solid and reliable.
I don't even have to explain because he's explaining.
Structure for us to use for all the cutscenes and dialogues within the game. Also, variables in GameMaker can point to other scripts. So let's say we needed to do something crazy that requires an escape hatch. Well, that's also incredibly simple, since in GameMaker we can set the value of the dialogue struct to another script and call it with script executes. With this, we have reduced over 1,000 dialogue cases into a handful that are easy to reason about and extend. Since this is a separate example, I'm not going to dive into this anymore. Okay, with all that out of the way, I think we can start closing up the code review, and I can start going over my comments. First off, yes, there's a lot more things wrong with the code I've shown from Jason that I didn't talk about. There were way too many things to nitpick, so I try to limit my comments to the biggest issues. I also tried to avoid offering changes or advice that is too far detached from its current structure and setup. That's why I didn't run through multiple solutions. Also, I didn't talk about any actual game design patterns, since that would be another video into itself, and he wasn't actually using any inside his code. Next, during the code reviews, I wasn't explaining any special concepts or anything. All of the Boolean stuff, the for loops, the safe default initialization, using functions with parameters, enums or const stuff, all of that is literally intro level program concepts. There was at no point in the code reviews where I went above a junior level developer's expected knowledge. Well, except maybe the struct iteration and the save file stuff. To help put this in perspective, let's pull up the Stanford CS 106A Intro to Programming course. This is a first year, first semester course. It's incredibly similar to what I took during my first year of college. And let's just look at the things you learn in. Basically, everything I discussed in this video is stuff you learn in this intro level course. The fact Jason doesn't even seem to have a good understanding or know about some of these things is just baffling. If we consider his
Oh, hey, I've seen that course before.
2002 LinkedIn start date as when he started learning about programming. That means as of today in 2025, he has 23 years of experience programming. Yet somehow, he doesn't even seem to understand the most basic entry-level concepts in programming. It doesn't matter what programming languages you use or learned. These concepts like loops and booleans are essentially universal in nearly all languages. Now, someone might argue he doesn't have 20 years of GameMaker experience. I don't think that's a valid argument, but let's go through it anyways. His first release game was Champions of Breakfast, and he spent roughly 8 to 9 months on it. So for Heartbound, he should have had a pretty good understanding understanding of things. If I wasn't making this video, I probably never would have touched GameMaker in my entire life. The entire time it took me to grasp the GameMaker language and write the code you saw in this video was roughly 2.5 hours, so I'm not giving Jason any passes due to a lack of experience with GameMaker. Now, I avoided trash talking his code too much during the reviews, but let me pull up that mega switch statement again. Let me also pull up some Yandere dev code. Now, I know everyone trash talks Yandere dev's code, but it's easy to see how and why he made this. He had zero previous game dev experience or programming experience, and he dived headfirst into Unity. He just took the first thing he learned and he ran with it for every problem. The code isn't good by any means, but you can understand why it's like that. With Jason, I'm just left so confused. Like, he's supposed to be a game dev industry veteran, and yet he's making stuff as bad as a complete amateur like Yandere dev. I also spent some time after finishing up this portion of the video thinking back to all the code reviews I've done in all my previous jobs. I've easily done somewhere in the thousands of various code reviews, and I've reviewed code from all sorts of experience levels, from senior software architects to people having done a 4-month bootcamp and having less than half a years of experience. And yet, I don't think I've ever reviewed anyone's code that was this bad. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this, but this is genuinely some of the worst code I've ever reviewed. And I didn't even explain or like dive into every possible issue with it. Plus, if we remember all of Jason's hacking claims, guess what? You need to know these basic programming concepts if you want to do reverse engineering or malware analysis. This is the foundation nearly everything else builds off of. Taking all that into account, I think Jason has been lying through his teeth about all his coding abilities, all his assembly stories, and just making stuff up with terms he's heard thrown around. If I was working with Jason and I saw this type of code being repeatedly submitted, I would push for him to be fired, with my state of reason being gross incompetence. The server, that's a pretty are mainly stories, with him being the only source of truth for a lot of them. So for most of this video, I'll just be explaining and teaching about the terms used and how
Slop
these things
News Network
generally
is
go,
great.
instead of making judgments like the previous two parts. Well, maybe a few minor judgments. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's start going through it. Let's start by bringing up the old VX Underground tweet that Jason responded to and recheck his YouTube short on his experience while he was at Blizzard.
I was one of the guys sitting there pulling down every bot that worked for every MMO that we worked on, everything at Blizzard, grabbed every single one of those, pulled it out into assembly, grabbed the code key from it, removed the polymorphic, found a way to fit it into Warden.
Okay, so from this clip, we got a lot of stuff to go over and cover. First, Jason worked on anti-cheat at Blizzard, and he dealt with bots. Plus, he did reverse engineering on the bots too, based on his comments. He also worked with Warden, which was Blizzard's anti-cheating tool that was directly integrated into games like World of Warcraft. The way Warden worked was, while you were playing the game, Warden would be running and using native API function calls from your system to collect data on your computer. This would include things such as what programs you had open while playing the game. It would hash the data it collected and periodically would send it up to Blizzard servers, where they would try to determine if you were running any known cheating programs on your system while playing the game. It also has some malware detection built into it too, apparently. It could detect stuff like keyloggers and warn if your system had been infected.
Oh, yeah!
Functionality and abilities, but we'll need real Blizzard
I haven't
employees
even
to talk
watched
about those
it.
details.
It keeps
Back in the
popping
short
up.
comments, Jason also pulled
But
down tons
honestly,
of bots,
I'm
pulled
really
them all
not
out into
all that
assembly,
interested
grabbed the
in
code
it.
key, remove the polymorphic, and then fit all this back into Warden somehow. Now, the issue with this
I like
clip
the
is,
shooting
while all these terms
breakdowns.
make sense on their own, kind of, together
Or
it ends up
high-speed
sounding like weird
chases.
nonsense he made up. This is why the VX Underground Twitter account is calling Jason out in the tweet. Also, for anyone that doesn't know what VX Underground is, it's a site that possibly holds the world's largest public collection of malware source code, samples, and papers. This is an incredibly popular site that many
Oh
real
yeah,
hackers
let
and
me
security
do it. Let me pull it up. I'll show you guys. Yeah, literally you can get all of these here. Archive, torrents, best of. There's merch. They sell merch. This is the exchange. I'm not logging in. They're pretty good. They're not one of my favorites. Let me actually pull up there's also this, if you want to be a pen tester. It's got some pretty cool things. Rubber duckies, shark jacks, key croc, bash bunnies. I know, like, you hear some of these. Field kits. The Wi-Fi pineapple. Basically, it's the way to catch Wi-Fi networks. There's also merch, of course.
Features used to find, study, and explore viruses. Plus, the people running the Twitter account of VX Underground are almost all going to be people within the field that actually really know their stuff. Now, let's go and explore what the code cave term means from the wiki link Jason has posted as a response. If we look at the opening line on the wiki link, it basically says it refers to a section of unused bytes inside a process memory. So what this means is when we have a program active, we want to check and see if there's basically an empty continuous block of memory within it. If we manage to find an empty section, we can directly modify it with the debugger and add some new instructions to the program's execution. The advantages for this approach are the modifications are quick and easy to include, and you just need the application itself to check for this. None of the original source code is required. The downsides are, in many cases, this will result in a modified executable, which can cause the program to crash or malfunction depending on what was done. And the biggest issue, the amount of empty space you'll have to work with is going to be incredibly limited, meaning how much ad hoc stuff you can add here is going to be extremely small. Normally, you'd never use CodeCave to try and do a complex hack or add program behavior inside it. If you were searching and trying to use a CodeCave, you'd use the CodeCave area to try and find a way to call a separate DLL file where you'd have your actual hack or bot code logic located in for this context. And the code cave would just act as the entry point for this DLL injection. Also, let me explain what a dynamic linked library or DLL file is too. Just like how you have an executable that's filled with compiled code that your system can run directly, DLL files also include compiled code. The major difference is DLLs are a separate file and they can be used by multiple
I started calling the DLLs
the code
DLLs
on the Windows operating system exists in a DLL file and other programs use it. Another big thing is, like the name implies with dynamic, the code inside a DLL can change, and the main program the next time it uses DLL will run that new code. Back to the code cave. I was also curious where the term code cave is normally used, since this is a pretty unusual and not often used hacking term. From what I found, it seems to be incredibly popular within the cheat engine user base circles. For those that don't know what cheat engine is, it's a program that allows you to view an active game's memory and modify the memory values directly. So let's say you were playing a single player offline game and you opened up cheat engine. You could do some simple stuff like find your character's health memory value or level and set them to the max. You could also try doing the code cave stuff by finding that area of unused memory and try to create a custom hack there. The hack would be fairly limited and simple due to size constraints though. Think something like a God mode toggle. Now, while cheat engine can help you screw around with single player offline games, it's not exactly a good tool to use with MMOs like World of Warcraft. The reason is with offline games, all the logic, updates, and variables are only on your system. This is what we call client side. So if something is modified with cheat engine, there shouldn't be any big problems since there's nothing else that needs to verify these values and data besides the game itself on your system. With MMOs and online games, on the other hand, this ends up in general being a very different story. MMOs have both a client side and a server side component to them. What this means is while the client side can be the game executable, which will be responsible while it's running to handle stuff like drawing and rendering the game itself, the server will be where the actual logic and values are being executed, read, and set to a database. Meaning, if you make changes on your side in this case, then when those values are sent out to the server to update and save, they'll more than likely have lots of checks in place to prevent getting bogus values and to stop cheating. This is very basic when dealing with online requests. Pretty much all servers are built with the idea of never trusting anything a client sends to it, meaning all the values that are made up with cheat engine and sent should be checked and verified again on the server before proceeding within a well-built server application. So let's say someone tried to go from level 1 to level 99 in World of Warcraft. When the level up event happens and the data is sent to the server will more than likely do something like the following. It will read the current database value that has your level, then it will check your level or the XP amount you currently have and the projected amount you've sent. Then it will probably have some safety and anti-cheating checks. For example, something like if you're leveling up multiple times in one sent data packet to the server, that's a pretty clear sign you're cheating and it could flag you and have you banned at this point. Another example, if you tried sending an insanely high EXP amount that should be impossible to get through legitimate means playing the game, the server might realize you're cheating and ban you, or they might have a safety check and cap the EXP value to something more normal and sane for the game. Regardless of what is actually happening within the server logic and what they have in place, the cheat engine approach wouldn't really work in most cases since the modified values aren't being used and saved directly on your system, but on the Blizzard servers, which as I just explained will have its own numerous ways of checking and determining if these cheat value changes are actually valid or not. So if cheat cheat engine isn't a good option for online games and MMOs, how do people cheat, make hacks, and bots for them then? Well, we're in luck. We don't have to guess or speculate, since at DEF CON itself, many famous WoW hackers are there as speakers and actually nicely explain all this stuff for us. Notably, a few good talks to check out are DEF CON 19, Hacking MMORPGs for Fun and Profit, DEF CON 15, Virtual World Real Hacking, and DEF CON 17, Subverting World of Warcraft. Also, a quick fun fact as part of the DEF CON 19 talk, Michael Donnelly is a co-guest speaker. For anyone who doesn't know who that is, he's the creator and owner of MDY Industries, and by extension the creator of Glider, one of the most famous and successful WoW bots. He was raking in around 4 million at his peak, and then he got sued by Blizzard and was made to pay 6 million in damages. Anyways, back to the type of hacks, bots, and methods used for WoW. We have a few major types to go over. First, we have the GUI-based macro systems. These are some of the easiest type of bots to make. Basically, you'll have a completely separate program viewing the WoW game window and looking at the various parts of the game screen. Depending on what pixel color your program sees at different spots, different actions will be performed by sending the keystrokes mimicking player behavior to your WoW client. So, for example, if you were grinding, you might have the bot casting an area effect spell every few seconds, and when your health and mana bars change color, the bot will know to use your potions to keep the character alive to continue making grinding possible. Another popular type of bot design is done through DLL injection. This was a hacking method I mentioned during the Code Cave explanation. This is another super convenient method and has few benefits. Since it's running with the game itself, it can have access to data structures and other important info from the game directly, allowing these type of bots to be a lot smarter and more sophisticated than the GUI macro ones. Next, we have the debugger based ones. These are less detectable than the other types technically, since with these you'd attach a debugger and use breakpoints and remote process memory to control things within the game. Based on most of the talks and stories, this wasn't something that was really done or used, more so a method that existed that some experimented with. Also, a quick aside, back to Jason's grab the code cave comment, this debugger method is technically the closest to his code cave definition, but with the rest of his comments and description, this still doesn't sound quite right in his context.
Doesn't sound right, and yeah, it wasn't really used. It isn't really used because it's the least effective.
I'll explain more about this at the end. Anyways, back to the bot types. Then we have the client replacement types. These ones are huge amounts of work and generally aren't the first bot type anyone will make. Generally for this type, you already have a successful bot going and you know how much you can auto farm, sell, and by extension profit off of. So now you'd make a client replacement to maximize the amount of bots you can run on your computers or servers so you'd be able to maximize your profits. This was an incredibly popular approach in China since there was a much larger WoW gold buying and selling economy there, whereas outside of China there was a larger bot buying economy roughly speaking. For more trivial hacks and simpler bots, there's also the option of using custom written Lua scripts. WoW includes Lua as their scripting language of choice and exposes various API options to customize certain things about the game, UI being one example. A side effect of having Lua included is a lot of function names will be in plain text and easier to search for, meaning you can try to hijack or use them for hacks purposes. With those bot explanations out of the way, I think it's largely safe to assume the type of bots Jason was dealing with at Blizzard were most likely the DLL injection type since he was pulling them out into assembly. Plus, the DLL approach was the most common method used by the bot makers during this time period, and we have some confirmation from the DEF CON talks for this too. Now, let's go back to Jason's polymorphic code phrase. If we look back at his tweet, we have a big problem here. Jason says polymorphism can be described as polymorphic code. The problem is these are two completely separate concepts and terms. Polymorphism is a program term, and polymorphic code is a virus term. Let's start with the polymorphism explanation first. Let's say we're back in C++ land again, and we have a class called animal, and it has a function called talk. Now let's say we create two other animal classes based on the initial animal class. Let's say we have a dog class with a talk function that says woof, and a cat class with a talk function that says meow. Now, let's say we have a list of cats and dogs. What we can do, since both classes are based on an animal, we can grow through them generically and call talk on each animal type of object in the list. Since each one will have their own unique talk function, the behavior of the program will change depending if the dog is saying woof or the cat is saying meow.
That's
now,
polymorphism.
Polymorphism will change the behavior a function has within the context of the code. It won't change the assembly structure of a program, since both talk functions will be compiled into assembly and be within the executable itself. Now, there is also such a thing as polymorphic code, or more specifically polymorphic viruses. Basically, some malware can change its own code by using a mutation engine to mutate itself. Basically, each copy of the virus will have its own unique key to decrypt its code payload in slightly different ways to make detection harder. For example, let's use basic math examples to show what I mean. Let's say we want to get the number 4 by using two numbers. We basically have infinite options. We can do 3 plus 1, 2 plus 2, 6 minus 2, 14 minus 10. All of these will result in 4, even if the expressions are different. The end result will be the same. This is basically what's happening with the polymorphic viruses. It's doing the same operations, but with slightly different semantics to make it harder to detect. Now, Now, you might be asking, if the virus is still doing the same thing, why doesn't anti-cheat or antivirus manage to detect it? So I'll give a quick rundown of some simple methods antiviruses and anti-cheat use to detect threats. Most antivirus and anti-cheat tools will check for a few quick and basic things, like DID or name of an application. Another way these tools will detect malware is they have a huge database worth of assembly and script blocks that are commonly used in malware. So when they're checking over a program and they detect a matching block of code to their database blocks, they can be pretty sure the program is malware. Okay, with all those explanations out of the way, let's go through Jason Short again piece by piece now.
I was one of the guys sitting there pulling down every bot that worked for every MMO that we worked on, everything at Blizzard, grabbed every single one of those, pulled it out into assembly.
Alright, so we managed to get his hands on the bot programs, and I was doing reverse engineering and trying to debug them directly in assembly. This makes sense so far, with the most likely bot types being the DLL injection once again.
Grabbed the code key from it.
And we have a problem. The code key being used inside the bot would not matter at all. A code key's purpose is to inject or call other code inside the program. The bot makers don't need to hack their own bot program to run code. This doesn't make any sense at all. The code caves would exist inside the Blizzard game files, not inside the bots. Also, you wouldn't be grabbing a code cave from anything. If you have a debugger open and checking a program in memory, you're already in the area and tooling to look for the code cave. Again, you'd be looking for a small area of unused memory. There's nothing here to grab. He's using the term even in his own statement and context incorrectly, and even if you applied it to the correct contents of the Blizzard game files, it still wouldn't make any sense. So let's drop this and go to the next bit.
Remove the polymorphic.
Okay, let's be charitable and say these bots were all made similar to polymorphic viruses. They weren't, but whatever. If you're studying the bot, you'd probably find the obfuscation and check to see how it's decrypted. You wouldn't be removing the polymorphic in this case. If you're ripping out the assembly instructions from the program, you're basically just left with a copy of the bot program, empty and useless. There's really no situation where you as the researcher and anti-cheat guy would be required to do this. So in all contexts, this doesn't make any sense either. Let's go back and finish up the clip now.
Found a way to fit it into Warden.
Okay, now how would you fit this into an anti-cheat tool like Warden? Since it works similar to an antivirus, you'd probably want to copy the common code block patterns you see in the bot into Warden. You'd also want to add other simple detection methods to Warden, like the name of the program or signatures related to it. You wouldn't need to remove the polymorphic, you just copied over parts of it and saved the instructions into the Warden database. So in the future, you could try and detect some users of this specific bot. If we're being charitable, we could say Jason misspoke multiple times in a row in that sentence, and he wanted to say something like the following. We got our hands on a lot of bot programs, and most of them were of the DLL injection type, with the injection method used being exploiting the Blizzard game files directly. The bot makers were smart and added polymorphic payloads to make detection difficult, but we managed to find unique enough patterns to add to Warden to make detection of this bot type possible. Do I think he knew this is what he was trying to say?
No.
Well, I think it's pretty clear if you watched my previous videos where I explain how poor his coding abilities are and understanding, or if you watched any of his multiple puzzle game streams where you see him cheating constantly. I think you won't be surprised when I say hell no. And I assume he had no clue what he was trying to say either. What I think is likely, he was just tossing around hacking terms he's probably heard thrown around by the actual devs working on Warden anti-cheat during his time at Blizzard.
Okay.
Moving on to another topic, let's leave the polymorphic and code cave stuff behind us slowly, and let's move to another clip everyone has been asking me to review, his next hero hackerman story of defeating an evil rogue hacker using a stingray.
I turned in a guy to the FBI when I was at DEF CON 24, I think it was. He walked into the room at the Lost Room. That was the year that I had the key. And he walked into the room and he's like, I need to put this device plugged into the wall under there. And I was like, you ain't doing that, man. And he goes, Lost said I could. And I was like, all right, fine. Go plug it in. And he plugged it in, put it under the couch. The moment he left the room, I unplugged it, pulled it apart. And it was, you ever heard of a stingray? So this guy tried to set one of these up in an environment with tens of thousands of people on a little thing about this big. In front of me. Yeah, it was great. Really smart.
Yeah,
he had done this in a number of locations. The other two devices that he had put out had actually been out and deployed, which was a security risk.
Jesus.
I took the device immediately, dumped all the information off of it. I actually looked at it. It had 4 screws on one side and 3 on the other side, so I knew which side was the access point that he was accessing because he had dropped the screw, which was thankful because things like this could be trapped. You know, there's all kinds of crazy that people can do. Opened it up on the other side, took out the SIM card that was in it, took out the memory card that was in that, popped the memory card in my machine to go look at the logs the guy had through it, and I was like, oh, this is really bad. Took all that, took it to the FBI contact, sat in a room for like 4 hours. They found the guy. He revealed where the other devices were. They arrested him. That was the end of it. And I think they gave me a challenge coin for that. I think I got an FBI challenge coin for that.
You think you got an FBI challenge coin? I always thought this one. Okay, so if you don't know what a challenge coin is, I'm gonna pull one up. I don't have one because I've never been to DEF CON. I want to go to DEF CON. These are DEF CON challenge coins. This is the FBI one.
Stingray was originally a specific device created
There
by
ain't
the
no
US
way
Corporation,
he doesn't
which would
know if
intercept
he's
and
got
disrupt
one.
mobile phone traffic and location data. It was essentially a fake mobile tower acting as an in-between the target mobile phone and the real service provider towers. This is what's considered a man-in-the-middle attack. These devices are in widespread use by law enforcement agencies across various countries, notably the USA, the UK, and Canada. These days, though, Stingray has become a generic name to describe these types of mobile phone intercept devices and not just the original Harris unit. Now, there's a few holes in Jason's story surrounding this. First of all, he sounds unsure if he won an FBI challenge coin or not, which I think is a pretty big issue. My reason being is he constantly shows off his DEF CON badges and wins. Like going to his Potato Sack Twitter account, his pinned message is DEF CON badge wins. If we go to his main Pyro Software Twitter account, every time he gets criticized or questioned, he pulls out his DEF CON badges and wins. His LinkedIn also has all 3 badges included in his honors. His Reddit intro posts also have his DEF CON badge win. He shows them off multiple times on stream and posts about them multiple times per year. I'm not blaming or holding this against him. Feel free to be proud of the stuff you got. The issue I have is if he's willing to showcase his DEF CON badges and wins basically at a minimum of like 4 to 5 times per year, every single year, why has he never shown his FBI challenge coin? I even managed to find him showing off his Blizzard
Where
Battle
is
coin,
DEF CON?
but nothing related to the FBI coin. Considering how much he loves to
Oh, I
share his
missed
achievements
it.
in
Yeah,
personal
it was,
life, he would have shared or talked about the Stingray and the FBI challenge coin at some other point besides this one podcast clip. Next issue with the story is there's no other record or people to corroborate the story. I couldn't find
August
any
7th
mentions of a
to
widespread
10.
mobile attack at DEF CON during any of the years he was present there. Lost, the owner of the room Jason was staying at while this happened, doesn't seem to have posted anything about it either. No other attendees mentioned there being any other Stingray devices noticed either. It's hard to imagine
I
tech conference
couldn't
full of
afford
more
to
than
go
thousands
this
of
year.
people that are all largely tech literate and knowing to practice device safety, and no one besides Jason noticed someone trying to monitor their phones with the Stingray. It's just way too hard to believe. I'll cut this part short since beside the clip I couldn't find any other info tied to this. Given how often Jason lies and over-exaggerates different stories, I'm inclined to say he's lying on this one too, since nothing about it seems true and there's absolutely nothing I can find to even suggest it might have happened. Moving to the next topic, we'll return to his time at Eagle Research Group, or as he referred to it, his government hacking. Now, if we refer back to his LinkedIn, we can see he did the following: penetration testing, working with sensitive networks, and develop custom tools. Now, we have a few clips to check out. First one.
My general wheelhouse control is physical access control systems, so breaking and entering, Wi-Fi related vulnerabilities, web related vulnerabilities, and social engineering. So those were my primaries when we were on those tasks.
Okay, so he did physical access controls, Wi-Fi network checks, and social engineering. Okay, that's slightly different from what he wrote, but that's fine. Let's check the second clip.
So your government is, dude, honestly, working for the government sucks ass. They pay more than God when you're a federal contractor, but holy shit, is it not fun. You ever published a CV? No, not at all, man. Like most pen testing, this is the saddest, shittiest truth. If you are a pen tester or a federal contractor pen tester, you are running scanners and you're bored out of your freaking, like, it is not engaging at all.
You're looking for vulnerabilities. If you're a pen tester, you're looking for vulnerabilities. There are multiple ways you can look for vulnerabilities.
There's very few times you're like, I get to do something cool today. It's usually like, oh, cool. I'm wearing a suit. I run a shitty scanner. I put together a report. I go home. Yeah, it's 99% writing reports. It is literally 99% writing. Yeah, it's not fun. I wish it was cool.
Okay, running scans to test for vulnerabilities and then writing reports, again, sounds fine. The only problem I have is, every single time I manage to find something about him explaining what kind of hacking he did, he changes his story and the things he was responsible for, but I digress. Anyways, let's talk about physical security hacking and testing for a tiny bit. Physical testing is actually pretty straightforward and direct. You're basically going to go around and check every fire exit or entrance or other possible entry point to see if any are open. Are there any points of entry that aren't guarded or locked? In fact, DEF CON has a couple of great talks on this exact topic. One of my favorite stories from these talks is how to defeat those glass office double doors you see at most modern office buildings, with the little
really
employee
easy
scanner next to it. Now, I'm sure most of you are thinking some advanced hacking techniques are needed, like...
Listen, there's multiple ways to get around those scanners. They're not super advanced. They look like they are, but they're not.
Figuring out how the keycard scanner
But this one is the funniest.
works, to making a fake card with the right data on it, or something else that's like movie-esque. But nah, you want to know the real way you defeat those door security? You go and buy a cheap $1 spray air freshener or a perfume bottle, and you point it directly at the top of where those doors meet, and you spray it.
Now, if you're not worried about being quiet, you can always just smash right through them too.
A tiny bit. Some office and door combos have a sensor at the top in case of a fire or other type of emergency.
probably going
so
to
by
jail
spraying
if
a
you do
thick
that,
spray
though.
near the sensor will trip up and assume there's a fire and lock itself, letting you open the doors normally without a card, and in many cases, no alarms will go off. So you'd be in the clear to walk in like nothing happened. For network testing, there's too many tools to pick from, so I'll just give one quick and popular example, namely Nmap, which is a network scanner that can identify hosts, services, open ports on a network, devices, operating systems, and even some vulnerabilities directly. For social engineering, I already discussed this in part 1 but a quick refresher. It's basically pretending you're someone that's an authority or coworker, and you're trying to trick an actual employee with access and credentials to either give you direct access to something or account details which you could later on use yourself. You might also be tasked with sending out internal phishing emails to check to see if the employees at the company you're targeting have enough training and security sense not to fall for obvious traps. And like I mentioned in the last clip,
AKA
you're not just
phishing.
tasked with doing hacks or scans. A huge part of hacking work is writing detailed reports describing exactly what issues exist and how they will be used to gain access so they can be fixed or addressed in some way. I can believe Jason did all these tasks. Nothing here requires any crazy training or hacking or coding ability. Though his stories about it keep changing, especially after the recent drama started coming out. After it came out, he kept reducing and toning down what he did. When giving answers on the stream, how much was exaggeration, how much was lying, and was actually true, I have no clue. I'm not super inclined to believe his words, but there's at least nothing wrong with any of these statements here. Alright, last topic we have is Jason's famous Mr. Robot claims.
I don't like Mr. Robot because they took some information that they should not have taken from a write-up that I did.
This is one of the big things that I wanted to talk about, because everything he says here is patently wrong. And part of it is downright stupid.
On some puzzles that I solved at DEF CON, and then they put them into an episode of the show, and I found out about it. And the only source for that knowledge was my write-up. Don't do that. You'll always be bad. Do you want to know what the solution for that was? Do you want to know what one of the solutions for that was? It was the Puzzle Master's personal cell phone number, to which he got thousands of calls. Maybe don't put things
It was not the Puzzle Master's personal cell phone number.
in your episode if you don't know what it is. Idiots. All right, so the reason I don't like Mr. Robot. This right here is my write-up for the DEF CON 22 Badge Challenge. Went viral as hell inside of the hacking communities. And now let's go to Mr. Robot's Twitter. Understand that this was the only place in the world that this was listed. Mr. Robot reposted this right here. That's that same string.
Okay, first of all, Jason's write-up wasn't the only place they could have found the puzzle. Popular sites like Wire have it front and center in an article. DEF CON itself still has it available too, and lots of other teams posted about it too. So no, Jason didn't have the only write-up. There were multiple teams at DEF CON that solved the Badge Challenge, and they all had their own write-ups posted shortly thereafter. Here's a write-up from Elegant, and if we look just a tiny bit below, we can see he also included the pamphlet picture as well, plus the original number series, and the decrypted letters portion. So no, by no definition was Jason's write-up the only one, or even the most viral and popular one. I even went and checked on the Wayback Machine to see how many notes his Tumblr write-up had on August 17th, 2014. This is 5 days after the original publication date. We can see there's 27 notes, not exactly crazy viral or anything. I then went and checked September 13th, 2016. This is 1 day before the Mr. Robot tweet, and at this date he had 150 notes. Not exactly viral or huge reach even after more than 2 years of this post being up. Plus, he was posting and sharing his write-up on Twitter and Reddit multiple times during these 2 years. Now, if we check roughly 2 weeks after the Mr. Robot tweet, we can see on September 26, 2016, he has 162 notes, or roughly a 41% increase in notes after he piggybacked on the Mr. Robot tweet to drive traffic to his write-up. Next, let's look a bit closer at the original pamphlet code series. Since we know the puzzle creator is lost, we can cross out his signature at the end. We're left with a series of numbers ranging from 1 up to 25. What's that common thing we're all using to discuss all of this that's roughly 25 letters? I'm sure lots of you have probably guessed it's the English alphabet. We can do a simple number to letter conversion, and we can get the following string. Now, let's look at that Mr. Robot tweet again. It's the same thing without the lost handle. This was truly impossible to figure out. My sarcasm aside, this is step 1 of the puzzle, and I mean that step 1 literally. This is part of what Jason is claiming is his unique, only in his write-up knowledge that Mr. Robot stole. He's claiming Mr. Robot stole the puzzle starting line from his write-up. I honestly can't tell if he's being serious with this, or if this is actually just like a decade-long social engineering experiment plus a little trolling mixed in. Anyways, let's pull up Elegant's walkthrough for the puzzle and see what they did from here. After they converted the numbers to letters, they did a road 13 on it. Road 13 is a simple letter substitution cipher. Basically, the letters of A to M are moved 13 letters
I have no
up,
reason
and the
to
letters
explain
N to
this
Z
all.
are
He's
moved 13
explaining
letters
it.
back. Then we get the following string. The parent pages will help you find your calling, but don't be duped. Cut down the woods, baby air dish, lost. Okay, now there's a few clues in the string. Notably, parent pages at the start. If we search this up, we'd find the parent numbers Wikipedia page. Thankfully, we don't need to worry about any crazy math stuff, and we just need the function pfn results, which is the row of 3, 0, 2, 3, etc. Next, we need the second part of the string clue, the woods they be air dish. If we search up those words, we'd find the air dish woods numbers Wikipedia page. Again, we don't need to worry about the math behind this, we just need the first few air dish woods numbers, namely 16, 22, 34, 36, 46, and 56. The next part basically relies on a separate pamphlet that has additional numbers. Here's what the original DEF CON 1 looked like. Anyways, we just need to pull these numbers out that are vertical and horizontal. If we look at the number set, we can realize there hex values, and we can convert them to ASCII characters to get the following string. The last step needed to solve this is part of the clue, cut down the woods, they be air dish. So we'll remove those matches, which leaves us with 251, a secret exclamation mark, which is where the Mr. Robot DEF CON 22 Bad Challenge reference stops in the Mr. Robot episode. The elegant write-up continues for a fair bit more, but let's stop here since this was the end of the context we needed for the Mr. Robot claims. Seeing as we could solve the Mr. Robot tweet challenge using Elegant's write-up, it proves Jason's write-up wasn't the only place that had this knowledge. Now, to some other important points, Mr. Robot has consultants with the tech stuff for the show. If we look at who's a consultant for the show, oh, Jeff Moss is a consultant for the show. For those of you who don't know who that is, he's known as Dark Tangent, and he's the founder of the DEF CON conference. So let me spell it out for everyone. The guy who founded DEF CON and knows what goes on in DEF CON is a consultant on Mr. Robot and decided to use a puzzle from DEF CON, his own conference,
Mr. Robot.
on the show.
It's so good.
Anyways, another issue, Jason blamed Mr. Robot for sharing Lost's phone number. First of all, this phone number isn't Lost's actual personal phone number. Lost is the main puzzle creator for DEF CON since like 2022 and an actual hacker plus security engineer. There's no way as part of a simple puzzle he'd be releasing his own personal phone number as the place to call to get a clue for additional steps.
It would be
Second,
absolutely stupid of him to do that.
Included his puzzle as part of the show. And if we check Lost's Instagram, we can even see he joined Mr. Robot at some point as an additional creative consultant. So clearly there's no bad blood between Mr. Robot, Lost, and the other DEF CON adjacent people. The entire beef and issues were Jason's own made up story. With that, let's wrap this part up. There's probably a lot more hacking stories I didn't find or touch on from Jason, but given how basically none of his stories stand up to scrutiny, it likely doesn't matter too much. Something else to note, ever since the second big wave of drama started, Jason has also gone and started changing his stories and toning down his claims. In fact, in one stream just a few days ago, straight from the horse's mouth, we have this.
What kind of dev work did you do at Blizzard? I didn't do any dev work at Blizzard. I've never said that I did. The internet has done some weird shit where they said like, oh, he said he's a dev for 20 years at Blizzard.
Seeing as how now he admits to never being a dev and never did dev work at
We
Blizzard,
literally watched earlier him say
that
he's been a dev for 20
and we're
years.
all lying and putting words in his mouth. Truly insane behavior, dude.
Like, Thor is the most egotistical fucking narcissist alive. Also, another thing, getting away from like all the bad stuff in there with Thor and shit. Nimmy Nightmare, if you know who Nimmy is, she's getting married. You all should know who Nimmy is. Okay.
진리를 열기 위해
죄다 벌레 씹은 표정이네. 사기가 저렇게 떨어져 있으니 싸울 맛도 안 나겠어.
I mean, there's really only... Oh god, no. Oh, I don't like this. This is a bad pull. I mean, there's really only one banner right now. I mean, there's the General Walpurgis banner.
열기 위해
저들도 내가 물을 싫어하든
Oh, this is a lot better. Never mind, this is still shit. Who's hitting me first? Okay.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지.
Well, never mind.
진리를 열기 위해
저들도 내가 물을 싫어하든 극도로 기피하는 것이 있었군.
입 밖으로 꺼내는 것도 조금 매스럽네.
Yeah, this really just keeps giving me bad pulls.
직접 열어드리죠.
Oh, okay.
전투 경험이 쓸모가 없지.
Never mind. This is a good pull. Maybe.
급한 조치였습니다.
No, bad pull. No, good.
제가 괜히 먹을
Oh
것들을
my God.
사려는 것이 아닙니다. 딴테. 이런 부수적인 효과를
Okay, I thought I actually I thought I was fucked. Okay, gonna get hit. That's fine. I wish I had. Okay. Fine, that's fine.
나쁘지 않습니다만 좀 무식하게
Ooh.
돌격하실 거라면 전 빠지겠습니다.
No. I don't think we're in the realm of fine anymore.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라.
Okay, that.
직접 열어드리죠.
이제야 실력을 좀 내시네요. 평소에도 이러면 얼마나 좋습니까?
No, I'm still okay. I'm still okay.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 열어줬다.
Got rid of one of
걱정하지
them.
않겠습니다. 어차피 이미 이길 거라고 확신하고 있으실 테니까.
Yeah.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 어떻게 다친 짓을 열어줬다.
조금 전의 귀하들의 전투는 못 살수들의 본보기가 될 정도야.
Perfect. This doesn't matter now.
열어줬지라. 열어줬다.
Okay.
저기는 땅에 떨어졌네. 이제 우리를 누가 막겠는가?
Oh, I don't have to hold back. I can do this by turn 6. Okay. That's not important then. This first turn here is not as important. Turn you.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라.
헤어라, 묘.
직접 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠.
씨알도 안 먹히는 방식으로 싸워놓고 해실거리면 상황이 다 좋게 좋게 넘어가나 6번 수감자.
This is the turn that. This next turn is where it starts getting harder. dominate. I'm probably fine to do this way. Dominate. No, I want yellow with yellow. Sure, something here.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠.
너는 저기로 가고 넌 앞에 서고. 내가 건드릴 필요가 없네. 그래 뭐 덜 다치고 오라고.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 직접 열어드리죠.
Ah, damn.
환상의 세계로 들어가 보죠.
They're fine, they're fine.
베어라, 묘.
Ha! Yeah, I get fucked down to 29. Okay, okay.
뒤로 무르 수단은 이제 남지 않았네.
Okay.
달방 앞으로 맞설 뿐. 무레배들에게 차가운 검격을.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 직접 열어드리죠.
배워라, 묘.
직접 열어드리죠.
배워라, 묘.
직접 열어드리죠.
Oh.
필요한 것인가? 면면이 탁하군.
Okay.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지요. 직접
Perfect. There we go.
기왕 치는 거 좀 더 쉬워.
위에서 당신을 관리자로 정한 데에는 합당한 이유가 있겠지. 기대하고 있겠습니다, 단테.
Ooh. Okay, wait. If I put it here, that's probably good enough. That's probably good, right? No, yeah, right here on this one.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라.
Okay.
환상의 세계로 들어가보자. 직접 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠.
배워라, 묘.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I messed up.
마음 앞에서 힘내라 같은 건 쓸모없다고. 어차피
Or
내가
did I?
생각으로 나서지 않으면 도리어 되져버리니까.
Let's see what happens if I do this.
눈만 똑바로 차려.
Okay, so of course I want... that. Here's the first one.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라.
의지대로 더 보여봐라.
Huh.
크게 다친 지성에 직접 열어드리죠.
뭐냐? 너는 좀
직접
자질이 있는데 나중에 인정할래.
열어드리죠.
괜찮은 공격이네요. 앞으로도 그렇게만 해주세요. 여관에 가면 또 한참을 떠드시겠네. 바리에게 해줄 이야기가 또 늘었군요.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 직접 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠?
자로야.
환상의 세계로 들어가 보죠.
위에서
언제까지
당신을
묻어만둘 수
관리자로
있다.
정한 데에는 합당한 이유가 있겠지. 기대하고 있겠습니다, 단테.
어두운 무지를 열어주죠.
이지대로
직접
더 보여봐라.
열어드리죠?
Answer me, Giabayo. No.
환상의 세계로 들어가 보죠.
달빛조차 잘려나갈 올거든 하나. 훌륭하군. 한 수 배웠네.
직접 열어드리죠?
여관에 가면 또 한참을 떠드시겠네. 바리에게 해줄 이야기가 또 늘었군요.
어두운 무지를 열어주죠.
헤어라, 명.
Okay, well.
자로야.
Dude, what am I even doing wrong here? Oh! What?
언제까지 묻어 만들 셈이야.
가망이었군. 알고 계시겠지만 제 도움은 없을 겁니다. 이건 녹음된 목소리일 뿐일 테니까. 일단 후퇴하고 머리를 굴리든 스스로 생각하십시오.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지요. 직접 열어드리죠.
그래, 그렇게 시원하게 처리하니 보는 맛이
크게
나.
다친 지성에
일 처리는 빠르게 하는 편이 덜 답답한 법이지.
직접 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠.
What am I even supposed to do here to end the game? To end this? Like, there's no way it's expecting me to get him to 0.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지요. 직접 열어드리죠.
헤어라, 묘.
환상의 세계로 들어가 보죠.
꺼내지
시간이
않았던
무한하진
사라지지
않죠.
않았을
단테, 이제 끝장을 내야 할 겁니다. 무한한 것도
I don't
대가가
actually know what I'm doing.
그 어디에도 없을 테니.
Oh, okay.
어두운 무지를 열어주지라.
이지대로
I looked it up.
보여봐라.
I'm almost there. I'm there.
열어드리죠.
물렁물렁한 곤약 같은 놈일세. 갖다 대기만 해도 썰려 나가는 걸 보니
열어드리죠.
절묘한 한압이었군.
직접 열어드리죠. 환상의 세계로 들어가 보죠.
그 어떤 모험에도 위기가 없던 적은 없었네. 그러나 이야기의 끝에는 언제나 승리뿐이었지. 그렇네. 바로 우리들의 이야기지.
What's 5 plus 8? $13.
어두운 무지를 열어줬지라. 어두운 무지를 열어줬지라.
사사로운 무리가 네 뜻을 감행한 것이냐? 그렇다면 그 무리가 위태로워야 입을 열겠구나.
How get fucked?
직접 열어드리죠.
Land of illusion.
환상의 세계로
There's a reason why I'm not using any of. Now he'll just be repeating
너는 왜
의미 없다. 두려워하지 마.
this set.
몸으로 뵐 생각을
그것은
하는
네
거지.
생각을 말한 뒤에 해도 됐지
맞는
않아.
연장을 쓰란 말이야.
Okay. Wait, okay, wait, give me a second. So that goes first. That one's first.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 직접 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠. 직접 열어드리죠.
배워라, 묘.
귀하들의 전투에 낭부가 있기를 기원하네.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라. 열어드리죠. 환상의 세계로 들어가 보죠.
자로요.
귀하들의 전투에 낭부가 있기를 기원하네.
Yeah, okay, that's first. Always gotta make sure that this one's first.
어두운 무지를 열어젖히라.
Holy shit, man. Oh.
보고 있자니 답답하군. 아까도 말했지만 죽고 사는 것에만 설사 그것이 환상이라도 상관없어.
틀린 말은 아니거나 가환. 너의 돈은 있지.
그렇다면 진의
네가 보았을 때는 나의 돈.
제게는 조금 많은 걸 녹여주는 불처럼 보였거든요.
녹이는 불이라 내게는 그렇게 보이.
인의 어질다는 것은 무엇인가요?
방금 네 입으로 말해. 오랫동안 쌓인 악해. 그 사이에서 대관원의 모든 이들은 그날에 대해 묻지도 말고 알려고도 하지 말라. 감히 품어선 안 되는 흘려보내야 했던 것. 하지만 나는 놓지 않았어.
아무것도 떠오르지 않았어요. 그저 누구든 간에 저를 붙잡고 비록 어르신들은 때때로 엄격할 때도 있어. 대관원에서 누구보다
들어가거라 보가. 선인들께서 너를 기다리고 계신다.
모조리 제가 보았던 알 수 없는 것들이 서로를 향해 울부짖던 희열, 웃음소리. 오늘 이후로는 내게는 더 이상 좋은 일이 매일 아침마다 이 순간이 저를 깨울 테고 밤마다. 그러니까 괜찮으니까 무서워하지 않아도 된다고.
왔구나. 몇백 년 동안 보았던 것 중 나는 처음이 제일 즐겁더구나. 아이고, 그 어머니라는 저 표정을 보았는가? 제 뱃속에서 나온 것은 정체.
시간에 맞춰 발톱이 온 것 또한 우리가 바란 것 이상의 완벽한 마무리였습니다.
몇 달간은 필요할 틈이 없겠네. 두 번 다시 없어.
우가 정말이지. 우리가 몸에 물도 없는 탁 계속해서 갈고가 그 빛에
오라버니, 뭐 하고 있어? 왜 날아가는 연을 붙들 생각하... 붙잡아 무얼 하겠어. 제 갈대로 날려가는 것이지.
저쪽 떼기밭 머리에 꽃주머니에 꽃잎을 몽땅 쓸어 담아. 그렇다면 훗날 흙으로 변하더라도 그렇게 꽃잎들을 묻어 이 끝없는 색깔에 그리하여 비로소 웃을 수 있었답니다.
가보. 너는 대관원에 그리고 대관원 밖에서 찾은 나의 도는 내게 인내를 가르쳤고 인이 없는 욕망은 제 몸을 불사르지만 도를 따르는 욕망은 자연스레 불씨를 간 때에 맞게 타올라. 그 안에는 무엇이 네가 이미 오래전부터
묻어두었어요. 복숭아 꽃잎이 어지러이 휘날리던
구덩이 속에 들어가는 것. 그러니 구덩이에서 나를 꺼내는 건 역시
홍원에 필요한 것은
오가, 너는 저들을 모두 구할.
알아요. 모두를 저렇게 제 눈앞에서 떨어지고 있는 사람만이라도.
상냥함이에요. 그것은 관심이고 바로 옆에서 울고 있는 친구가 있다면 같이 슬퍼 상냥하면서도.
그 말은 넓게 흐르며 만물을 감싸려 하는 강과 같군. 하지만 상냥함, 그것으로는 주변을 더군다나 홍원을 다스리는 자라면 일이 일비를.
아니에요. 눈앞에 보이는 슬픔과 기쁨을 보고 느끼고 표현할 수 그리하여 가까이에 있는 한 사람을 안아줄 수 있게 된다면, 그렇게 서로가 서로를 안아줄 수 있다면 제가 만인을 끌어안지 못해.
오래 기다린 것 치고는 부족한 답이었다. 하나 그것으로 되었다. 허무라면 모든 것은 무미고.
가치요. 네가 이에 저놈이 짓거리는 것은 다스리는 것과 상냥함 따위로는 만족감을 주지 못한 그딴 걸로는.
가환, 너는 네가 옳다고 생각하는 길을 가지만 이 방에서는 나는 나의 인을 따를 것이며.
무슨 수작질이지?
나는 이제 기권하겠다. 이로써 이 방에 남을 자, 네가 나와 같은 선택을 하지 않겠다면 이곳 하나, 너 역시 가주의
잘 알고 있군. 그래, 내 목표는 고작 홍원에 하지만 그렇다고 조종당하듯 네 말대로 움직이는 건
너는 겉으로 비열하고 감정에 몸을 실은 것처럼 보이지만 그러니 여기서 물러설 수밖에 없다.
알고 있어? 이놈도 저 자식도 아주 지독한 냄새가 나. 이까지 동전 따위.
너는 지금 구름이 되어 구름이 밟으면 그러나 그뿐. 이를 유념.
가시가의
잠깐만.
그러면
그런 문제가 아니잖아요. 저희는 창고에 있는 황금가지가
계시잖아요. 가주가 되기를 간절히 포기하지 않고.
사실상 1등이
가주 심사가 끝났다. 참가했던 모든
혹시 이게 어떻게...
그 보배로운 최종 승자는 이후의 철암사에
그러니까 우리도 아직 상황을 이해하려고...
가주대전 최종 결과 3위.
아가씨, 너무 흥분하지 마시고 보는 눈이 많으니 채통을.
2위 가시가의 보호.
그자가 무슨 연유로 그런 행동을 하였는지. 저로서는
아니, 지금 뭔 이야기들을...
뭐 일단
그게 아니라 왜 나...
그리고 가주가 될 자리를 얻게 된 1위. 가주 심사에서 최종 승리한
그러니까
가시가의
정말 가주가
Oh, I'm gonna end stream there. Oh wait, I gotta show you 200. God, I feel like I deserve more than 200. Holy shit. That was such a fucking fight. That was such a fight. Oh my god. Yeah. Let's find someone to raid. Do. Should have given me like 400 for that fight. Holy shit. Which I literally have 3 people in here. What the fuck do you mean? You know what? Kelvara. I see Kelvara. It's been a long ass time since I've raided Kelvara.